There are people walking this earth with a light so radiant, a soul so awakened, that even the strongest religious systems tremble in their presence. They don't wear crowns, they don't sit on thrones, but their very existence shakes the foundations of centuries-old institutions. These aren't rebels, these are the chosen ones, too spiritual to be contained, too powerful to be controlled. And because they cannot be silenced through reason, religion punishes them through fear, not because they are evil, but because they are free. Today, we're revealing 9 secret ways religion punishes the chosen, not for being wrong, but for being too right. If this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, type 888 in the comments to claim your divine alignment. And before we dive deep, subscribe and join the Soul Tribe, because here, we don't just speak truth, we awaken souls. Let's begin. Number 1. Isolation by design. Imagine awakening to a truth so deep, so life-changing, that you can no longer stay silent. You begin to speak, to shine, to live from a place of raw, divine clarity. And just when you feel most alive, religion turns its back on you. This is the first secret punishment: isolation by design. It doesn't start with chains, it starts with whispers, with friends who slowly pull away, with family who praise for your soul but won't look you in the eyes anymore, with leaders who once praised your passion, now calling you rebellious, unstable, or worse, lost. Chosen ones throughout history have experienced this exile, not by accident, but by intention. They are labeled witches, heretics, mystics gone too far. Why? Because their light threatens systems built on control. Their wisdom doesn't fit the script. Their presence calls people to think, to question, to awaken, and institutions fear that. So the chosen are removed, spiritually, emotionally, and socially. They're isolated not just from church or community, but from belonging. The goal isn't just to silence them, it's to break their spirit before their truth spreads. You'll find this same pattern repeated across time. Prophets driven into deserts, seers locked in silence, visionaries forgotten or feared. And what's most heartbreaking? Many begin to believe the lie, that they are alone, that their truth is dangerous, that their calling is a curse. But here's the deeper truth. The isolation isn't a punishment from the divine. It's proof that you've outgrown the box religion built for you. You're not being cast out because you're broken. You're being set apart because you're waking up. And sometimes, separation is protection. Not to harm you, but to prepare you. Number 2, demonization of inner power. Picture this: a child who knows things before they're told. A teenager who feels the energy in a room without a word being spoken. An adult who dreams vividly, heals naturally, senses what others can't. These aren't random traits. They're signs of divine connection. But in many religious spaces, they're treated like danger. This is the second punishment: demonization of inner power. When a chosen one begins to tap into their intuition, when they feel guided without scripture, hear truth in silence, or access peace without ritual, it shakes the very core of organized religion. Because power in these systems is meant to come from outside of you, from a priest, a pastor, a prophet, a book. So what happens when you realize the divine speaks directly to you? You're told it's deception. You're warned that you're being misled, that your gifts are dangerous, that the voice inside is not God, but the enemy. And suddenly, the very power that was meant to guide and uplift you becomes something to fear. Religious institutions have long survived by keeping people spiritually dependent, by convincing them they need a middleman to reach the divine. But the chosen don't need permission to pray, to know, to feel. Their connection is direct, and that makes them powerful beyond measure. But that power also makes them a threat. So instead of being encouraged to grow, chosen ones are discouraged from trusting themselves. Visions are called delusions. Inner peace is mistaken for pride. Healing is mocked or silenced. And over time, these gifted souls start to hide their light, just to avoid judgment. But the truth is this: your intuition is not the enemy. It is the voice of your soul. Your connection to the divine is your birthright, not something that needs to be earned or approved by anyone else. To demonize that power is to keep people afraid of their own divinity. But once you reclaim it, once you realize that what they fear in you is what's sacred about you, you become unstoppable. Number 3, guilt as a weapon. At first, it's just a question, a quiet thought. Am I wrong for feeling this way? But soon, it grows into a weight, a whisper that follows you wherever you go. How dare you feel divine? This is the third secret punishment: guilt as a weapon. Unlike isolation or public rejection, guilt works silently. It doesn't shout. It creeps. It lives in the background of your thoughts, turning your awakening into something you feel ashamed of. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you dared to know yourself. Religion doesn't always need to exile the chosen. It teaches them to exile themselves. It plants seeds of self-doubt so deep that even the most awakened soul begins to question their own light. You start to wonder if you're being prideful, if your connection is arrogant, if your spiritual gifts are a trick, and that sacred sense of belonging you once felt. It begins to dim under the weight of invisible shame. This is how guilt works, not as punishment, but as a program. One that teaches you to police your own soul. The chosen ones don't stop because they're not strong enough. They stop because they were made to feel like their strength was sin, and so they shrink, they hide, they silence their gifts, not for safety, but for acceptance. But here's the truth most will never say: guilt is not a sign of wrongdoing. It's a sign that you've been taught to fear your own power. And the moment you recognize that, the moment you release it, is the moment you start to rise again. Not from ego, but from soul. Because you were never meant to carry guilt for being who you are. You were meant to carry light, and to shine it where others are still afraid to look. Number 4, rewriting their legacy. They called him a rebel when he lived, a threat, a troublemaker. But once he died, they built temples in his name. This is the 4th punishment: rewriting their legacy. It's a tactic as old as time. The chosen ones, those who carried radical truth and divine fire, are often feared while they're alive. Their messages are too pure, too bold, too liberating. So institutions fight them, discredit them, silence them. But once they're gone, everything changes. The same voices that once rejected them now claim them. Their words are softened, their power is filtered, and their message is edited to fit the system they once threatened to shake. The rebel becomes a saint. The prophet becomes a mascot. The mystic becomes a mural on a wall. Buddha taught release from attachments, but his image now sits beside rituals and rules he never asked for. This isn't respect, it's repackaging. By the time the world honors the chosen ones, it no longer remembers them. It remembers a version of them that's been made safe, palatable, powerless. Their fire is turned into candlelight, their roar into a whisper. And so, their true message, the one that could set souls free, gets buried beneath tradition. Not lost by accident, but hidden by design. Because if the world heard the real message, if it remembered the full truth, it might rise. Number 5. Forced conformity. They didn't need to chain their bodies, they only had to chain their minds. The 5th punishment is subtle but suffocating. Forced conformity. From the moment a chosen one starts to awaken, they're surrounded by rules dressed up as righteousness. They're told that obedience is holiness, that silence is sacred, and that following the crowd is the path to God. But deep down, they know the truth. They were never meant to follow. They were born to lead. In these spaces, curiosity is treated like rebellion. Asking the wrong question becomes an act of betrayal. And the more the chosen one tries to stretch their wings, the tighter the cage becomes. Not a cage of bars, but a cage of expectations. They are told to sit still, blend in, obey. Not because it brings them closer to divinity, but because it keeps them from disrupting the fragile order of the system. One woman saw visions and was told it was evil. One man heard the voice of truth inside and was told to pray it away. Another child asked why and was told never to question again. This isn't guidance, it's spiritual suppression. The chosen one's vibrant, living connection to the divine is covered in layers of ritual, rule, and fear. And what begins as spiritual devotion becomes spiritual imprisonment. They dim their light not because they want to, but because they're told it's dangerous to shine. But here's what they forget to tell you. The path of the chosen one was never meant to be a straight line. It was meant to crack walls, to shake systems, to awaken others. So when religion demands conformity, it's not asking for your devotion, it's asking for your surrender. And the soul was never meant to surrender to anything less than the truth. Number 6. Surveillance and spiritual policing. When you're always being watched, even your thoughts start to whisper instead of roar. The 6th punishment is one of quiet control. Surveillance and spiritual policing. For the chosen one, it's not just about what they believe or say. It's about how they're seen, watched, judged. Every word becomes a risk. Every silence becomes suspicious. And the people who once felt like allies, friends, family, even mentors, suddenly feel like eyes for the institution. They don't call it spying. They call it concern. They don't say they're controlling you. They say they're holding you accountable. But what's really happening is this. Your freedom is being exchanged for their comfort. A woman starts to speak about energy and healing. The next week, she's pulled aside by elders and told she's going astray. A young man begins asking deep, spiritual questions. His parents are told to keep him in line before he leads others into confusion. This form of punishment isn't loud, but it's relentless. It forces the chosen one to shrink in public, to second-guess every revelation, to keep their spiritual truth hidden behind a polite smile. Fear becomes the new faith. Not a fear of the divine, but a fear of rejection, exile, shame. And so the chosen one begins to self-police, to censor their own soul, not because they've lost their power, but because they're afraid of what will happen if it's seen. This is how brilliance is buried. This is how chosen ones are turned into shadows of who they were meant to be. But you must remember, they only watch you because they feel your light. They only fear you because deep down, they know. Your truth can set people free, and that kind of freedom terrifies control. Number 7. Suppression of feminine and mystical energies. What can't be tamed is often feared, and what's feared is usually silenced. The 7th punishment is one of the oldest and most persistent: the suppression of feminine and mystical energies. From ancient priestesses to modern-day healers, the divine feminine has always been a direct channel to the sacred. She is wild, intuitive, emotional, nurturing, and deeply connected to the rhythms of the universe. But to systems built on structure, control, and hierarchy, this kind of energy is dangerous. And so, she was renamed. The priestess became a witch. The oracle became hysterical. The healer became a threat. A woman who dreams in symbols is told she's delusional. A man who feels deeply is told to toughen up. A child who speaks with spirits is told to stop making things up. This isn't just misogyny, it's spiritual sabotage. Because feminine energy isn't about gender. It lives in all of us. It's the part of the soul that flows instead of follows, that listens instead of obeys, that births new ways of being instead of repeating the old ones. But because this energy doesn't fit into neat boxes or rigid rules, it's attacked, labeled, repressed, not because it's evil, but because it can't be controlled. And when the chosen ones awaken this power, when they begin to feel the sacred within their body, their dreams, their intuition, they're told to shut it down, to be quiet, to fit in. But hear this: your emotions are not weakness. Your visions are not madness. Your sacred knowing is not a threat. It's a key, and that's why they tried to hide it. Number 8. Misinterpretation of spiritual awakening. When a soul starts to awaken, it doesn't always look peaceful. Sometimes it looks like chaos. But that chaos is sacred. The 8th punishment is one that cuts deep: the misinterpretation of spiritual awakening. When a chosen one begins to awaken, the signs are powerful: vivid dreams, sudden waves of emotion, feeling energies others can't see, hearing truths in silence. These are signs of spiritual growth, but institutions often see them as signs of madness. What's holy is labeled as sick. What's divine is called delusion. What's awakening is mistaken for a breakdown. It starts young. A child who senses too much is told they're imagining things. A teen who questions reality is told they're unstable. An adult who feels the energy in a room, who cries for no reason, who dreams of symbols and receives messages in stillness, they're given labels, diagnoses, and prescriptions. Instead of being guided through their awakening, they are silenced through medication or shame. The systems say, "You're not spiritual, you're broken." But what they're really saying is, "You don't fit into our definition of sanity, so we'll erase what we can't explain." This is one of the most tragic punishments, because awakening is not easy. It strips you down. It shows you truths you're not always ready for. And the moment you need understanding the most, you're made to feel insane. But make no mistake, you are not broken. You are breaking open, and the world has always feared what it cannot name. Number 9. Silence through fear. The most powerful voice is the one that dares to speak truth. And that's exactly why they work so hard to make you afraid of your own. This is the final punishment, the most subtle, the most tragic. Silence through fear. By the time a chosen one reaches this point, they've survived exile, shame, distortion, and control. They've endured judgment for simply being who they are. And so, a survival instinct kicks in. Not in the body, but in the spirit. They begin to hide their truth, not because they don't believe it, but because they're afraid of what will happen if they speak it. They bite their tongue in rooms filled with lies. They dim their light in places that fear the sun. They self-censor, not because they lack courage, but because they know the cost of being seen. This is how control wins, not by chaining bodies, but by quieting souls. The chosen ones begin to shrink themselves, not realizing that their very voice is what the world has been waiting for. Because voice is power, and fear is how that power is taken away. But here's the secret. Every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you speak when it's easier to stay silent, you break the spell. You reclaim the part of you that was never meant to be hidden. And the moment you speak from that place of truth, you don't just awaken yourself, you awaken the world. If you've ever felt too different, too deep, too connected to things this world told you to ignore, let this be your confirmation. You're not broken. You're chosen. Chosen to feel what others numb, to see what others ignore, and to carry a light many will never understand. Your intuition, your sensitivity, your vision, they're not flaws. They're sacred signals of who you truly are. You were never meant to fit into systems built to control. You were meant to break them open with love, with truth, and with the undeniable frequency of your soul. Your gifts aren't dangerous, they're divine. And the very fact that these systems tried to silence you only proves how powerful you really are. So if this message stirred something in you, something ancient, something real, comment 8888 to anchor your truth. And subscribe to join a soul tribe rising together, not in fear, but in remembrance and in power. Because this world doesn't need more followers. It needs leaders. And the chosen aren't chosen to follow. They're chosen to lead. Until next time, protect your light and keep rising.